Hey there, and welcome to another deep dive on the Explainer. Usually, I'd give you a quick roadmap of what we're covering today, but honestly, we're going to skip the table of contents entirely because we have a massive ancient mystery to unravel. We're going back thousands of years to look at a story that literally blurs the line between myth and actual historical reality. Okay, let's dive into this. What is the oldest story of human flight? I mean, long before the Wright brothers, way before Leonardo da Vinci's visionary sketches, and even before the Greek myth of Icarus flying too close to the sun, there was a king in ancient Mesopotamia. We are talking about a 4,000-year-old tale of a man taking to the skies. It's just an incredible premise. But to really understand this journey, we have to start with the myth itself. So, gather around the digital campfire because we're entering the world of ancient Babylonian legend, a time when gods supposedly walked the earth, and animals made divine pacts with the heavens. Section 1. The Eagle and the Serpent. So here we have this fascinating yet incredibly fragile living arrangement. At the center of the legend is a massive tree. At the very top, an eagle has built its nest. And down at the base, a serpent has made its home. Now, these are two apex natural predators, right? But they strike a sacred pact. They both make a solemn promise to Utu, the ancient sun god, that they'll behave well toward one another. And, most importantly, they promise to share their hunted food with each other's children. It's this beautiful picture of harmony. Until, well, it absolutely isn't. Let's walk through this brutal cycle of betrayal and revenge, because that harmony falls apart incredibly fast. Step 1. The eagle completely breaks the sacred vow and eats the serpent's children. The serpent, as you can imagine, is devastated and weeps to the sun god Utu. So, step 2, Utu actually intervenes. He tells the serpent to go hide inside the stomach of a dead bull. Step 3, sure enough, the greedy eagle swoops down to feast on the carcass. And then, step 4, the serpent springs the trap, captures the eagle, and throws him into a dark pit to die of hunger and thirst. It is a merciless, perfect trap. But the story doesn't end in that pit. The narrative tension is super high right now, and this is exactly where we introduce the human element into this standoff. Part 2. A Flight to Heaven. Utu, the sun god, decides to intervene one more time. He sends a human, a man named Etana, to help the starving, trapped eagle. Etana agrees to save the bird, but he strikes a pretty daring deal. He wants something in return. You see, Etana is desperate. He needs an heir, a son to carry on his legacy. So he asks the eagle to help him find the mystical plant of birth. Now, to get this magical plant, they can't just scour the earth. They literally have to go up to the heaven of the supreme god Anu. Which brings us to the ultimate question. Did the first human flight actually succeed? Just imagine being the first mortal to ever leave the ground, strapped to the back of a giant, disgraced eagle. What do you think happens? Well, it turns out our ancient hero had a very, very relatable problem. Attempt number 1 was kind of a total failure. Etana actually gets completely terrified of the sheer height once they're up in the air, and he makes the eagle turn around and take him right back down to the solid ground. But he gathers his courage for a second attempt, and this time, he succeeds. They fly all the way up to Anu's heaven, Etana secures the magical plant of birth, and it actually works. He finally fathers his son, a boy named Balih. Now, this is a phenomenal, epic myth, but we are going to execute a bit of a reality pivot right here. We're shifting our tone from campfire storytelling to a hard documentary focus. Because Etana, he wasn't just a character in an ancient bedtime story. Section 3, the real king of Kish. Now, what's really interesting is the stark contrast between the legend and the historical reality. On one hand, we have the magical story we just explored, a man who flew on an eagle to heaven to find a mystical plant. But historically, we have his actual documented identity recorded in the ancient Sumerian King List. Etana is heavily documented as the 13th king of the first dynasty of Kish. He's listed formally as the successor of Archaeological and the son of Mashta. He was a very real flesh-and-blood monarch. In fact, the ancient scribes completely blended his real-world conquests with his mythical flight. The Sumerian King List describes him with this exact translation, the shepherd who ascended to heaven and consolidated all the foreign countries. It is absolutely wild how they weave his political and military unification of foreign lands right alongside his magical journey into the sky. It's history and myth, recorded together as one single truth. And the Sumerian King List gives us some staggering data to go along with his reign. Just think about this massive number. 1,500. According to the ancient text, that is the number of years King Etana supposedly ruled. Now, some copies of the text are a bit more, let's say, modest, claiming he only ruled for 635 years before his miraculously conceived son, Balih, took over. And Balih? He supposedly ruled for 400 years himself. Obviously, human beings don't live for 1,500 years, so how do modern historians verify any of this? How do we separate the man from the myth using actual, physical, archaeological evidence? Section 4, written in the clay. So, here's the crucial point. Early kings on the Sumerian King List are usually not considered historical by modern scholars. They're typically viewed as legendary figures, except when they are also mentioned in contemporary early dynastic documents. Etana is one of those incredibly rare exceptions. He wasn't just a fairy tale character, he was a documented historical figure who actually lived, ruled, and left a physical mark on the ancient world. Let's move along and see how this builds across the ancient world. We actually have physical clay tablets that map out the massive spread of his myth. There's an old Babylonian version found at archaeological sites like Susa and Tel Harmal. There's a Middle Assyrian version excavated at Assur. And we even have the standard version discovered at the Great Library in Nineveh. These three distinct linguistic versions prove that this story was famous, translated, and cherished across entirely different eras of Mesopotamian civilization. But we aren't just talking about dead history here. It's time to connect this 4,000-year-old history directly to you and me today, pulling the lens back to contemporary scholarship. Section 5, An Ancient Story's Legacy. You know, modern folklorists actually classify the stories we tell using highly structured academic databases. There's a system called the Arne-Thompson-Uther Index that categorizes international folktales. And right there in the database is the definition ATU 537, the eagle as helper. Hero carried on the wings of a helpful eagle. This exact motif from our Babylonian myth fits perfectly into how academics study narrative structures today. And here is why this truly matters. Scholars suggest that the myth of Etana didn't just casually fit into this category. It likely originated it. This specific folk type, the whole hero flying on an eagle concept, became the absolute blueprint for countless later oral traditions. The bedtime stories, the fairy tales, and the epic narratives we still consume today have their structural roots deeply embedded in these ancient Mesopotamian clay tablets. Which leaves us with a totally fascinating reality to ponder. When you watch a modern fantasy movie or read a comic book where the hero is rescued by giant birds or flies through the sky on winged creatures, how many of our modern heroes are secretly borrowing the wings of a 4,000-year-old Sumerian king? The next time you see a hero take flight on screen or in a book, remember Etana, the historical king who dared to touch the heavens, leaving a legacy that still echoes in every story we tell. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the myths.